Hello and welcome to the Vlogging Pod. Tonight we are joined by romantic fantasy author Kim Alexandra. Hello, Kim.
Hello there. I love it. Thank you so much for having me here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. Now, we spoke just a few minutes prior. I'm going to take this bracelet up because it is dangling on my table. That's driving me nuts.
Mhm.
Okay, so there we go. um, we were just talking. I didn't have it in my notes, but since you mentioned it, you have a little experience of doing what I'm doing. So tell us a little bit about that.
I do. I actually spent most of my career behind a microphone. I started with records, if you can believe that, as a disc jockey. And, and my last job was at Sirius XM Book Radio. I was one of the co-hosts. So yeah, I produced author interviews for like 5 or 6 years, talked to hundreds, if not thousands, of authors. And now I'm on the
Nice.
other side of the microphone, and it's very exciting. I've been writing full time since I left there, so that was about 7 or 8 years ago.
Nice. How many books have you accomplished within that time?
Book number 7 comes out January 25th.
Awesome. Awesome. Now, you actually have been more into writing long before that. Because what I understand is in your youth, you used to write stories about the backyard animals.
I did. I think my first one was about baby fawn, a deer walking around in the forest. I was like 6 years old or something. So that was my first love, was writing.
Right. I
Absolutely.
I think that happens for a lot of us. I think we're just kind of born into it, or we get introduced and we can't get enough of it.
Yeah, I think that's yeah, it's not something that you can go, well, I'm tired of this, I'm not going to do it anymore. It's always there in the back of your mind.
Right. So we know your inspiration of writing has hit you at a very young age, but when exactly did you find that your characters started to speak to you?
When you're working full time, as many writers know, it's very difficult to really concentrate on writing. I could not have written full time while I was working in radio, especially not when I was interviewing authors, because when you're reading that many books, the other people's work seeps into the back of your brain, and you don't want to copy somebody else's style. So when I stopped working at Sirius XM, I had some time to myself. They gave me a lovely severance, and I'm very grateful. And I came home from being fired, and I said to my husband, "Well, I'm going to go be a barista now." And he said, "No, because first of all, you're not qualified to do that, and second of all, you need to start writing your books because that's your dream. That's what you really wanted to do." So I'm very lucky and very grateful that my husband is subsidizing my writing for the time being. Hopefully, I'll be making that J.K. Rowling theme park money eventually, and I'll be able to repay the favor. But I started thinking, and I wanted to write a fantasy because that's my what I grew up living in. That's the world I wanted to be in. And I started thinking about characters, and then to my great surprise, the characters started speaking to each other. They don't really speak to me; they speak to each other. Now, when I was interviewing authors, a lot of them would say, "And then this character said this or did that," and I was like, that's cute, but I don't believe that's really the way it happens. Well, I'll be darned if that is not exactly what happened. So instead of sleeping many nights, I listened and I listened to their conversations. And then in the morning, I desperately try to remember and transcribe what they told me. And I don't know how it happens or how it works, but I'm just glad it does.
If you hadn't have brought it up, I was going to mention it that you had thought, what the heck about other authors. That's one
Yeah,
reason why I brought it up because I found that interesting that you had that turnaround time that you were like, hey, that actually does happen.
it really does. The times that it happens is when I'm getting ready to fall asleep or when I've taken a yoga class. And at the very end of the class, you do shavasana where you just lay there and relax. And I really think it's when you're in that in between awake and asleep or totally worn out and your front brain, your busy monkey brain relaxes a little bit and it allows that creative energy to move to the front where it has a little room to breathe. I'm just guessing, but that's what it feels like to me.
I find when I'm really into the writing, it hits me in the shower, and then I'll start speaking the lines that I'm thinking that I'm going to write. I'll just say them to myself, try it, and then I'll
So you
do
don't
it.
forget them.
Go ahead.
So you don't forget them.
Yes. And then I just repeat it until I can get to my phone and I'll text myself so I have a little note or something that I know to put into the books.
Do you have 400 notebooks with like scribbling in them like everybody else?
Yes. Oh my gosh, it's so bad.
And then the next challenge is reading my own handwriting, of course.
Oh, yeah. My husband, he's actually in the room, always says my handwriting's horrendous. So I feel you. I feel you. At the time, I understand what I'm writing, but then later
Sure.
on, it's a little bit wow. So, with your characters manifesting within your mind, let's talk creativity of the story
Okay.
themselves. Tell me how a typical story comes about for you.
It's like a puzzle, and I feel like sometimes I almost leave a trail of breadcrumbs for my future writer self. Because sometimes I'll be like, and I'll be working on a scene, and it'll be like, and that character is wearing a blue hat. What? Why is that so important? No, no, I will say to myself, the blue hat is absolutely vital. I'll be all right, I guess. And then, like a chapter or two chapters or two books later, I'll understand why it was so important that that character is wearing that specific blue hat. Again, it's one of the mysteries of creativity. Fortunately, it's all not all that sort of vague. I'm not a good outliner. I'm a little bit more of a pantser. I usually know the general direction I want to go in, but I let the characters lead me. I'm much more of a character-driven writer than a plot-driven writer. I find plot the most difficult. I wish I could just write little vignettes of characters standing around talking to each other, but unfortunately, that's not the way fiction works.
I find that very interesting. When I first started writing, oh, I'm getting an echo. Hold on, sorry. I used to think that people had all their stuff together, that they
Mhm.
had it all outlined and everything, and I was just this weird duck who doesn't. And I have noticed since I've started doing this podcast, I've gotten more like myself, like you're saying, that aren't much of the outliners. Now I outline as I go. Do you find yourself
Mhm.
doing that? So you have a file of notes that you've actually created for the characters as each story has progressed.
Yeah, I usually end up doing that around I've been writing series. This
Okay.
is my second series. And finally, when things get just too complicated, I have to, all right, I'm going to stop. And this week or this 2 week period is going to be about who is where, who is doing what to whom, where are they in the timeline? Timelines, oh my God, my timelines are a nightmare come to life. And doing like the serial killer wall with the string on it and everything. But usually I'm a little bit into the story because I like to see how things are going to shake out before I start really giving everybody a roadmap.
Right.
I like it at least the beginning. I like it to be a little more organic, and then I sort of have no choice but to get organized about halfway through.
I'll tell you what I find the most entertaining for myself is when you get that idea and it's an afterthought after you've already written it, okay? So now you have to, and I know this sounds stupid and so off the wall, but I enjoy going back and rewriting myself, like fixing it and tweaking it and
Uh-huh.
making it to fit that little bit that I was like, oh, why didn't I think about this 5 chapters ago? But it is
Hopefully, not
entertaining.
after it's published because
No,
it's tough to do it that way.
heavens no, no, heavens no. That would be a
I really
nightmare.
like editing. I mean, I know a lot of people are allergic to editing, but I like to think of it as like a Christmas tree. Like the first draft is just the tree, and the editing is putting the lights and the ornaments and everything on it and making it beautiful and perfect.
Yeah. Now, I see you had me up until there. My executive assistant does my editing, and then she hands it off, and then I'll go back. And oh my gosh, is this the worst time of my whole time? That when I do that part, I'm like, oh no, not this again. So I
Yeah,
want.
I mean, it can be daunting for sure if you get lots and lots and lots of notes. But my editor, her name is Carly, and she's with Booklight Editorial, and she's fantastic. And she keeps me honest. I know when I'm being a lazy writer. I'm like, nope, Carly's going to call me on this. I better fix this before it even gets to her.
I'm hoping as the time goes by that my assistant just knows me so well, she rewrites it, publishes it, and I don't have anything to do.
It's a dream.
Yes,
That sounds like a
it
dream.
really is. I like to dream big. So I want to ask you about a statement. Explain
Okay.
to me what handcuffed by the rules of writers means to you and why.
Handcuffed by the rules of, before I started writing, there was a meme that was going around about how, was it Elmore Leonard or somebody, never start by talking about the weather, never start with a dream. uh, and I know the millions of grammar rules about prepositions and whatnot. And I think you have to know the rules, certainly, and then you can start to dismantle them and make them work for you. I mean, the grammar has to be right,
Mm-hmm.
but if your characters are speaking in dialect, you can rearrange it to suit yourself. Never, there are no nevers. I don't think in fiction. Like never start with the weather. Sometimes it's a nice day. You start with the weather. There are things that I do agree with though, like characters describing themselves in the mirror. That's kind of been done to death. So there are some that I agree probably shouldn't be handcuffs, but maybe should be like those little white bumps on the side of the road so you don't go off into the ditch.
Right. I got you. I got you. So I hear that you call yourself a lazy writer. And I believe the reference refers to the time of the day that you write. Can you explain a little bit about that?
I'm just not a morning person. I mean, I know people get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and right before the kids go to school, and man, hats off to those people because I roll out of bed at 9 o'clock, and that's when my day begins. I mean, I can't work for more than maybe 4 hours. Um, I just can't. I mean, there's diminishing returns at that point. But yes, I'm not only a lazy writer, but I'm an extremely lazy person.
Well, we just adopted puppies, and
Mhm.
I'm now I'm seeing 7 and 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, wow. So
Yeah,
I
we have about a year old Siamese cat named Frida, who I think, yep, she's on top of a cabinet. She's in a place where a cat shouldn't be. So yeah, we had many months of her getting us up at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I have a Siamese as well. Her name is
Oh,
Samson, but that's a whole other story.
they're little lunatics. I mean, I love her, but yeah,
Yeah.
she
They
got me
have
out of bed early
they
in the
have a
morning.
personality themselves. Cats in
They sure
general.
do.
So, um let's spend a moment to speak about the New World Magic. I'd like for
Yes.
you to tell our listeners about the series itself before you tell us about the latest book, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay. I'd love to. We got a assignment. I was part of a writers group a couple of years ago, and the leader of the group said, "I want you all to rewrite a fairy tale because we were trying to think of something that we could do collectively." And I think maybe one or two of the other women in the group did that, but I thought about it and thought about it, and I had just finished an epic fantasy series that was very long, had many characters. The books are really long, and that was a 4 book series. And I wanted to write something that was contemporary, short, possibly in the first person, and with a much smaller list of characters, just to see if I could do it. And I cast around and started to think about, well, what I don't want to write about something that's been written about a million times. I have a print of the unicorn in captivity over my desk. I got it when I was maybe 10 years old from the Metropolitan Museum in New York. And I've always loved it. I'm looking at it right now. And I thought, well, has anybody ever done a unicorn shifter? Maybe, it doesn't have to be a fairy tale. Maybe it can be a fairy tale creature. And I started working on it and started thinking about it. And I wanted to write a story about a world. I wanted to set it in Washington, D.C., my hometown, because D.C. is very rarely seen unless it's a thriller and there's politicians and, politics and stuff. So I wanted to make it DC the fantasy setting. And my heroine is named Ruby. She's a bartender and she's got a dark past and big secrets. And that's not a spoiler because it practically happens on the first page. She's coming home from her shift one night and she saves the life of a unicorn. Somebody's trying to saw his horn off and she saves him and he turns into a person because otherwise it would not be much of a book.
Right.
So he turns into a beautiful young man named March. And March and Ruby are the main characters of the book. It's a little bit like True Blood, where the fairy tale characters are living side by side, although sort of in the shadows of the human community. And that's the premise of the book. So March and Ruby are on the run from whatever was trying to kill the unicorn to begin with. And they're aided and abetted by her friends and his friends. And some of them are good, and some of them are not. And some of them are human, and most of them are not. And there's a second book in the series called The March Effect. And the third book, which is called The Great Shatter, comes out January 25th.
Awesome. Now, I think the March Effect is one that we put on our promo for your book, for
Yeah,
you, for
yeah.
coming on. So, The Great Shatter is what's coming out on the
Yes.
25th. So wow, we're zooming up on that 5 more days.
Oh my
Um,
God. It's fine. Everything's fine.
so tell me what you have planned as far as a release for The Great Shatter.
Well, we're living in a time where you can't do a lot of stuff in person. So
Right.
I'm trying to get the book out. I think we got the book out to quite a few book bloggers. So hopefully they're going to see some reviews. I'm going to be on Drunk Mythology Gals podcast next week, talking about the book, and hopefully a couple of other podcasts. And basically, if I could, I'd be going door to door, knocking on doors, and handing out copies. But so
Right. Oh, I feel you. I feel you. This whole situation our world is in right now, just it's crimping our styles.
it really is. I managed to, in a break in the action, they actually had the Maryland Renaissance Festival in October. They had it all fall, but I went to sign books in October in person, and man, it was so nice to see somebody I'm not related to in person.
Yes, I understand that. So since we talked about what's coming and what you have out currently, I want to jump back just a tad and linger
Hmm.
on the Demon Door, an earlier series,
Yes.
but well worth mentioning. Sorry, my
Well,
pronunciation
thank
there.
you.
Tell us about the series and if any more will come,
Oh
or
boy.
will we get a spin-off of the series?
That book that was my first series. For some
Hmm.
reason, I thought my very first book should have two timelines on two worlds, 40 named characters, and be very. It was a very complicated series. With, like I said, with a lot of moving parts, and it nearly killed me. But I'm very, very proud of it. The name of the series is The Demon Door, and it's an epic fantasy series along the lines of Dune or Game of Thrones.
Hmm.
But it's also got, I think, a really lovely romance at its heart. It's got a lot of politics, which I love writing about politics, and I did a lot of world building, which I also love. As far as any more of the books, when I finished the last one, The River King, I was like, no, no.
Not even
But
a
I miss those characters, and I
not even
love
a
them, and I'm kind of
spin-off.
wondering what they're up to.
Not even a
So
spin-off.
you never know. I'm very hard at work on New World Magic. I'm in the
Huh.
middle of the next book, book 4, I guess it'll be in this series, and blocking out even book 5 and beyond. This is going to
Right.
be more of a long running series. But hey, never say never. I do love those characters desperately, and I'm wondering what Rune and Lelit and all of their friends are up to as well.
Yeah,
So yeah, my mind has thought about that.
the only thing that ever gets me is when I'm into something like a series or whatever, and I'm always like, I want more. um,
Yeah.
it kills me to have to move on to another series. In fact, when I start to buy a series, I'm like, okay, this is mind you, I don't have this many books in any of my series, so I'm like a hypocrite here. But I love to buy ones that I know are going to have just a lot, like 12, 14 books. You know what I mean? I'm like,
Mhm,
so I can
mhm.
just keep it going as much as I can. I know I'm
Absolutely. If you like the world and you love the characters, you want to just soak in it. You want to spend time there,
right.
and that's what I love about writing fantasy. It can be so incredibly immersive when you're doing world building.
Oh,
I mean, I love
yes.
writing about food and clothes and manners. I'm not interested in writing about battles. That's not the kind of stuff I write. I want to write about politics and fashion and what hand do you eat with, and I love that kind of stuff.
Wow.
The stuff that builds that world around you.
Yeah.
You're reading.
You'd be fun to work with, I think. I really do. Um,
I've never written with anybody, so I can't speak to that. But you never know.
I could see you working with some. I think you have some very strong points. I mean, just hearing it and comparing to myself, I'm like, wow, I'm weak in that. I'm weak in that. So I think you'd be fun to actually have a partner with. Um, my final question for you,
Mhm.
since we're just in the midst of the new year, tell me what's coming for you. I know you said you have a fourth book.
Yeah.
Um, events, private stuff. I don't know, things are worth publicly announcing. Tell me what's coming on this new year for you.
God, I wish there was more stuff. I was supposed to sign at an event at National Harbor here in DC in March, and it got pushed back to October of next year. I'm going to be hopefully not my desk. at the Maryland Renaissance Festival coming in this fall. I do have the book coming out in next week on the 25th. The following book, if I can sidetrack for a second, the following book, which is book number 4, I wrote completely and I gave it to my editor. And she said, "There's a book missing. There's a book missing between books 2 and 3. 3 needs to be 4. You need to write book 3." So I went back and wrote book 4. So now I'm like sort of retrofitting what is turning out to actually be book 4, and trying not to think about book 5, which is also on my mind quite a bit. So I think it's going to be a lot of work this year, getting out of the house whenever I can. We were hoping to go to possibly Portugal or Greece over the summer. Knocking wood again that that'll happen. Like everybody else, we're trying to make it happen day to day.
Okay, before I let you go, because you just brought up an interesting point when you were saying, and I just want to clarify. You have 3 books in your series right now that you have out.
That's right.
And but you said book 3 was technically supposed to be wait a minute. Book 4 was technically supposed to be book 3, but you did book 3 because your editor felt like you needed another book.
Yes, that's correct.
Nice.
There's a gap. There's what book 3 turned out to be The Great Shatter, which will be coming out next week, follows Ruby's best friend on her adventures. So it's sort of a side quest, if you will. But it's made my understanding of the world and the characters so much deeper and so much greater that the actual book 4 is going to be tremendously helped by going right back and spending time with them in book 3. So I'm not sorry I did. I'm very glad I did, and I'm very proud of this book. It was a hard going because I didn't know the characters as well. Right. When you're starting to write something, your main characters hopefully very, very well. And I was kind of getting to know some new people. And now I know them really, really well, and I love them too. So
I find that interesting. So basically, book 3 really opens up your mind and gives you a little more insight about what's to come. Yes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you so much for being on the program. You were very entertaining. And XM just doesn't know what they're missing.
I thank you for saying that.
You're welcome. Thank you again, everyone, for coming in tonight and being a part of the program. Please stay tuned to next Thursday when, let me scroll down here to the screen, we have Amy Shea on the program. Thank you again, everybody. Have a great evening. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye for now.